Hello, hello. I was told we were supposed to be dancing when we came on the screen. I think we were supposed to come on right after the video, but we don't have music now, so we can awkwardly dance for a moment. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first of the Rust Foundation's Ask Me Anything sessions. My name is Sage Griffin. My pronouns are they, them, and I will be moderating today's conversation. I'm joined today by two members of the Rust Foundation's Board of Directors, Shane Miller, the chairwoman of the Rust Foundation and a senior engineering manager at AWS.
Hi, thank you so much, Sage, for joining us as our moderator today. And thank you to everyone who is participating in this first of a series of Town Hall Ask Me Anythings. I'm super excited to have the conversation today. Thank you.
And we're also joined by Mark Ruskov, the secretary of the Rust Foundation and a member of the core team.
Hey, everyone. Excited to share what we've been up to and get to answer all of your questions.
All right, so before we get to those questions, I've been told that we have a major announcement to make.
Yes, we do. I am super excited to share with you, the participants in our town hall today, a public announcement that the Rust Foundation will be making tomorrow. The Rust Foundation will be announcing that Rebecca Rumble has been appointed Executive Director and CEO of the Rust Foundation. Beck has a deep background leading nonprofits. She has worked across industry, academia, and governments. She's created organizations that have served communities. Most recently, Beck led the development and execution of the international strategy for a nonprofit called My Society, operating across 50 different countries. In that role, Beck led research, communication, policy, events, and fundraising. Beck has the unique combination of skills and collaborative style that make her a perfect leader for the Rust Foundation, and I am super excited to welcome her as our new leader.
That's really awesome to hear. I remember seeing, I think it was back in July that y'all announced you were starting your search, and we haven't really heard anything since then. So can you, one of you give us a little bit of insight into what that process looked like?
Definitely. So we were both, Mark and I, on the committee that formed. It was composed of 3 project directors, including Mark, and 2 corporate directors, including myself. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about the journey that we went on as a committee?
Yeah, sure. So the committee formed initially, and one of the first things we did is look at what our options were for finding an executive director. And we ended up looking at several companies that actually do this as a professional sort of service to foundations like ours. And as part of that, we looked at what they do, and we ended up selecting a firm called Parent Lever. The search firm started by interviewing both the board and also members of the project to figure out, what do we want? What is our goal with the executive director? And then based on that feedback, we ended up filling a large amount of applications, which the committee reviewed, and those were across the whole world. And I was really happy to see all of those excellent candidates. Shane, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of your experience there?
Yeah, so picking the executive search firm itself is something that is new to me, and that we had to start from a place of what things are important to us in terms of the dimensions of the search, and where we landed with Parent Labor is we were looking for an organization that was really clear about what the process would be, what their expectations of us would be, and also a firm that had worked with a startup before, because we were coming from a place of not being really clear and aligned on what the roles and responsibilities of our executive director was going to be, right? We needed someone to lead us through that process that had experience successfully navigating that with a startup. And then the last thing, but definitely not the least, it was really important to us that we have an international search. And Parent Labor has extensive experience in recruiting internationally. And in fact, Beck is in the UK. So yeah, it was a series of processes, and in the end, we had a unanimous decision from the committee and then from the entire board that Beck was the best candidate.
That's really awesome to hear. When is the community going to get to meet her?
That's a great question. So Beck officially took the leadership role for the Rust Foundation yesterday. So it is day 2 for her. She will definitely be reaching out and starting to introduce herself to all of you very soon. And I feel confident that the next in this series, the next town hall, Ask Me Anything, will be hosted by Beck.
Well, that's awesome to hear. I look forward to getting to see that.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of questions coming in, so let's hop over to a few of them.
Okay.
Actually, before we get into any of the specific questions, I've noticed we've been getting a surprising number of technical questions, which my understanding was this isn't really the right forum for that. So maybe let's start by, can you all talk about what you see the role of the Rust Foundation as part of the greater Rust project is, both in the short and long term? Shane, let's hear from you first.
Sure. So, the mission of the Rust Foundation is to support the Rust project and the maintainers. And where I see us, like the role I expect us to play in that is the creation of a platform that brings together the companies that are benefiting from the value of Rust to contribute to maintainer health and wealth, to ecosystem completeness and stability, and to the growth of the developer community. So there are a lot of different things that the foundation is going to need to do in order to make all that possible. But I think it starts from acknowledging that we are a platform that is connecting users with builders.
Mark, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things we've both mentioned in past meetings, between Shane and I and others on the board, is that I think this question is sort of fundamental to understanding, why we're here and all of that. But it's also a question that everyone has their own sort of slightly unique take on, even on the board of directors. And if you ask members of the project, I'm sure they'll also say, I want X thing over Y thing, and they'll have their own take. One of the things that I'll add is that as we look to sort of the future of the foundation, it's definitely not about setting the technical direction for the project. So while it is a platform, as Shane says, for bringing people together and enabling that collaboration, it's not about the foundation making decisions itself on what the next feature should be, or whether the compiler is named one way or another. That's for the project to decide, where we have lots of technical people who are experts in making those decisions.
So if I'm a major corporation, I couldn't just buy a foundation membership and then decide that Rust is getting a garbage collector?
No. No one in the foundation has the authority to insert themselves in the project governance.
All right, fair enough. Actually, speaking of project governance, I know one place I've seen some confusion in the community is whether the existence of the foundation has changed the role of the core team in the project at all. Mark, since you are a member of both the foundation board and the core team, I figure you might be able to clarify that a little bit for folks.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that's a good question to ask. The core team is still a team on the project, and while I am a director on the foundation and Florian is as well, there's no other sort of direct involvement there other than the sort of connection the core team has with all corporations and other entities in the community that want to interact with the project, where the core team can help them connect and find the right relationships to build. Obviously, the foundation is sort of playing a closer role, and the core team is definitely involved in giving feedback on proposals, just like the project directors are. But there's no direct oversight in either direction.
All right, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All this actually leads into a question that we've been asked by somebody who registered. My interest in Rust is not the same as my employer. but only companies can be members of the foundation. So how do I ensure that my voice matters? Shane, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, the Rust Foundation is about supporting the project and the maintainers. And the maintainers are building a product for the Rust users, right? So there's overlap between these things. They're complementary. I think one of the things that we are there's like so many connected arrows. The foundation is funding the maintainers' ability to do the Rust survey, which is reaching out from the maintainers to the Rust users to find out what their priorities are. And I know Mark has been heavily involved in getting all of that organized. Mark, do you want to talk a little bit more about what we're doing with the Rust survey?
Sure. Yeah. So the Rust survey is something the project has run for several years now, and this year the project is still running it, and in fact it's coming out in just the next couple of weeks. But the foundation sees itself as supporting that effort, right? So the foundation is not drafting the questions, is not directly involved in sort of telling the project, right, what to ask, what not to ask, but rather providing the resources for the project to be able to run that in a professional way that engages as broad an audience as possible. And so one of the sort of things that we are constantly looking at is how can we make sure that that relationship is collaborative, providing the resources the project needs. And so sort of going back to like the question that was asked, if you're a Rust user and you're interested in providing feedback, in some sense, the foundation is enabling new pathways to do that, but it's not really changing the sort of core calculus of the project is the one seeking that feedback. And, every Rust user is more than welcome to join and contribute, whether that's, through patches, through just commenting on GitHub issues, or even just being involved in the ecosystem, which is, very valuable work.
So do you think it's fair to say that when the project finds itself needing resources, whether that's just money directly or some other form of resource that one of the foundation's members is able to provide, the foundation sort of exists to help funnel that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this has happened repeatedly already this year. So one example is the press release that we put out this morning, where someone from the compiler team pointed out that there are contributors who would like to participate in contributing to the compiler, but were not able to do so in an equitable way because they didn't have the compute resources to make it reasonable. Where in being able to compile the compiler was taking an hour for a single build on their personal laptops, and so that contributor came, or that project maintainer approached the Rust Foundation and said, this is a place where I think you can make a difference. And we have worked across our membership to try to figure out a way to enable that. And I know, Mark, that you did a lot of the work with the infrastructure team to make sure that we had the right mechanisms in place to be able to support this. I don't know if you want to say more about that.
Yeah, so I think it's worthwhile to point out that, as we are looking, we put out a press release this morning, and I'm really excited to see where this goes, but the sort of rollout is definitely gradual, and we're not quite ready to, you don't have your SSH access just yet, but I think, it's coming soon, and I'm excited to see, how big that program can go. And I think this is another example where, that the project is interested in these resources. And there's definitely a lot we can do from the foundation side, but it's also where the project can give a lot of guidance on what actually is useful and what dimensions, and that collaboration of seeing, okay, here's what the foundation can offer, here's what the project needs, how can we map those together in order to sort of enable people to be maximally happy when using these cloud build resources.
Makes sense. Seems like there, given the membership of the foundation, there might be some companies there that have a lot of cloud resources available.
It seemed like an easy ask.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, I mean, our goal with that was, and this I think is going to be a repeated theme, but to leverage the resources of our members without having to out of pocket from the foundation budget, right? So instead of saying, yes, we can pay for that, what we said is we have members who can provide that as an in-kind contribution directly to the foundation, to the project, and make that happen at no cost to the Rust Foundation. And those three companies took up that offer and agreed to do that for us.
I mean, and that's really awesome to see, you know, when there's options like that. I know as somebody, I used to do open source full time and trying to fund that. I know I've been hoping, and I think a lot of other people have as well, that eventually the foundation is going to start directly sponsoring folks who are working on the Rust project. Is that something that y'all see as an option at some point in the future?
You know, it's not just something that we see as an option. It's something that we have spent extensive hours researching and trying to solve this year. We have experimented with some models, right? We are incentivizing having companies hire full-time Rust maintainers and contributors, and some of those folks are on my team at AWS. There are definitely other member companies at the Rust Foundation who have created and filled similar roles. But you know what we know, what we're hearing from the community is that that model does not work for everyone, and we're having to look at other ways that we can drive funding. And it's really hard. It's so hard, right? You know, we're trying to come up with clear criteria that is fair and equitable. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be accessible to everyone. And we have to be careful that when we plant a seed that we're going to grow a tree that we can afford, right? And that's not just about being able to continue to fund the maintainers that we have today. That's thinking forward to, hey, we have explosive growth happening here. As the maintainer group grows, are we going to be able to grow this fund in a way that makes it accessible to future maintainers? It's been a absolutely a frustration, I know, for me personally and many other members of the board, that we were not able to do more with that this year. One of the things I'm super excited about with Beck, however, is that I have every confidence that she has the experience and skills to create a successful program that is going to work for the Rust Foundation and is going to provide some really cool options for our project maintainers.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I mean, I think if you ask anybody who's tried to do any sort of like open funding for an open source project, they'll tell you it's an extremely hard problem to solve. I wish Beck luck with that. I do not envy her having to work on solving this problem. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think I might throw in that, you know, I think we definitely appreciate, and, you know, this town hall and other, you know, future events like this are a way for people to give us these feedback. And, you know, as we explore these funding models, it'll be crucial for people to say, you know, what works, what doesn't work. And, you know, we will ask you as well, but the feedback given to us is also crucial to that understanding being built. So
makes sense.
Thank you.
So I did notice in the last month or two, though, you did have an instance where you were helping take some amount of burden off of the contributors' shoulders. It was one that I was very personally excited about. I saw that you all had taken over the crates.io on-call rotation, which, for those who aren't familiar with my background, I was one of the people who started the crates.io team and am responsible for that on-call rotation existing and was on that rotation for many years. And it's not fun to be on call 24/7 as an unpaid volunteer. So I was very excited to see y'all take that off of the current team's plate. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I want Mark to talk about this because he was so heavily involved in it. But first, I want to pause and say thank you, Sage, for everything that you did for Crates and for the project. The Rust programming language is definitely going to have a resounding impact, not just on IT, but on the sustainability and security of our industry, and all of that founders' commitment and sweat have made that possible, and we're tremendously grateful to be the beneficiaries of what you've done. Yeah, and so and now I'll let Mark answer your question. Sorry.
Thank you, Sage, and thank you to, I know after you stepped down, there were several other volunteers who were working also. Essentially, I think there was a half and half rotation for a good bit, and so we definitely were fairly quickly, as the foundation started up, investing in, okay, how do we figure out where does this go? And I think this is another opportunity to look at how sort of the foundation looks at how do we select who does this work? How do we look at how we do that in a way that's fair to who we select, but also fair to everyone in the community. And I think one particular thing to call out here is that as we discussed in the press release, we chose Ferris as the sort of company, and into that went a lot of decision making, a lot of involvement, a lot of thinking. How do we make sure that we're not necessarily saying, okay, you've been doing this for a year now we're going to choose some company and just sorry, you get nothing. So we went actually to both the people who are on call, and we asked, do you want to do this? And somewhat unsurprisingly, I think they said actually maybe not. And so as we took that feedback into account, and we actually did a lot of sort of interviewing with both the Crates.io team and with people who were sort of interested in the signing up, so to speak, to get paid to do this on call. And we ended up choosing Ferris for a variety of reasons. But I think, thinking about going forward, there's going to be other opportunities, both, with Crates.io, but also with other, breast infrastructure, where we see, there's a clear need for someone to be doing this full time. It's either because it's on call or it's something that sort of has a similar shape. And so, we will be able to continue developing those models, whether that's through direct, sponsorship of individuals or companies. And I think the foundation is going to keep exploring, what works best in each case.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear that y'all gave them the option to continue doing it, but be paid for it first. Because, I mean, yeah, definitely the problem was that it was being done by unpaid volunteers, but it's not surprising to me that ultimately they turned that down, because that wasn't a problem. That seemed like, oh yeah, you just throw money at it and it gets and it automatically gets better. Yeah, that was just such a great move. I was very excited to hear about that. So thank you.
I guess one thing I should add is that one of the things that the foundation going in, cared about a lot is that the rotation used to be just 2 people, and even further ago, I think it was just you, Sage. And one of the things that I've never been on call, but I can only imagine having to be attached to essentially a pager 24/7, and even with 2 people, that's still like you're almost attached 24/7. And so I think the current rotation, I don't remember the numbers offhand, but we definitely wanted to be able to, 4 people, grow that to the extent we can, so that there's less need for someone to constantly be attached week over week over week over week. Especially if that someone is also doing great work with either the Crates.io team or elsewhere in the project, and on-call time is maybe not the most productive use.
Yeah, because when it's only 2 people, whenever you're not the primary on call, you're still the backup on call because there's nobody else. So like it definitely can be stressful to just be in some part of the rotation all the time. And I think it's safe to say that generally speaking, folks don't get into open source to join an on-call rotation.
It was interesting, even talking to vendors about providing that on-call support, because we heard a similar response from vendors that taking just on-call without taking ownership of the product was going to be a hard sell to their own staff, even in exchange for a contract, right? So it is not something that any engineer is generally excited to do. And, it is a unique vendor who is willing to take on the on-call responsibility and not take on the technical direction for the product, which was a requirement for this contract. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that it was a requirement that the team remain in charge of the project, because that would be devastating to see that change.
Absolutely.
So this has been asked a few times, and I'm not going to have a good way to pivot to it non-awkwardly, so I'm just going to awkwardly pivot to it. Is there any news about getting a quicker turnaround on the release of the minutes from the monthly meetings?
Well, I think the update is we now have an executive director and CEO, right? So in the same way that the project has been a mostly volunteer organization, the Rust Foundation Board of Directors is a volunteer organization. It's not that we don't think that publishing the minutes is important. It's just that there are so many things that are important. As we talk about, getting contracts for on-call support and, looking at different models for funding sponsorships and things like that, it's hard to determine on an hour-by-hour basis, is the right thing here to do something that's going to benefit the project, or is the right thing to go through the process to get minutes approved and published. And I say all that as our poor secretary is here on the spot. So Mark's position in the project is as secretary, but holy moly, he's been doing so many other things this year that I'm looking forward to Beck and her staff that I expect she will hire very soon, picking up some of these tasks and making us just a much more efficient organization.
Yeah, and I guess I'll add to Shane's answer to note that, I think from a sort of very simplistic perspective, we can just publish the minutes, but one of the considerations that I personally had is that, the minutes are actually, maybe not the best format. And I think we want to aim for more than just, here's a document, let's hope you understand it. And so, one of the things that I'm hoping to work with Beck on is how do we make sure that, the foundation's business as a whole, not just the board, and sort of the full transparency is ensured. And whether that, is publishing the minutes, I'm sure that, maybe it's a component of the sort of process, but it's not the full solution. And it may not even be sort of necessarily part of the solution, because having written the minutes, I can tell you that they're not, I think without the context that, board members have from meetings and so forth, they may not be the most revealing content.
Well, that's fair. That's fair enough. I'm glad to hear that there'll be some hopefully quicker turnaround on some form of that information in the future. So we've talked a little bit about the ways that the foundation has allocated resources recently. We've talked about one specific way that you could do it in the future. Are there any other specific places of interest for the foundation to start allocating resources in the future that hasn't already happened?
That's a really good question. I think this is one of those places where probably every single member of the board has a set of things that they wish could be funded. It goes back to putting together the right program in order to manage those things, and determining how we are going to prioritize. I think Beck is going to have a lot of opportunities to make huge improvements, and exactly how she's going to do that. I'm hesitating to go in any particular direction, because it feels like I'm sort of setting her up. Mark, do you want to say more about anything specifically?
Yeah, I think I might add, so sort of this is less forward looking and more backward looking, but one of the things that, I think we've seen questions about elsewhere, and maybe in the question queue here, is that, as we've transitioned from sort of the past Rust org into the sort of foundation Rust org, one of the sort of things that has happened as part of that is moving over the trademarks, the sort of legal assets, but also all of the infrastructure onto sort of the foundation's wallet. And that's pretty much done at this point, has been done for most this year. And I don't know, Shane, maybe you want to chime in on sort of some of the interesting things we've learned as that process has continued.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a couple of things. One is that it's probably no surprise to everyone that infrastructure costs are going up, right? The project is growing, and so our costs are getting bigger. And so, you know, part of what we have been doing as board is trying to make sure that those costs are going to be covered well into the future, right? And the other thing is that there are places where we saw opportunities for improvement, and Trademark is one of them. When the Rust Foundation was created, the trademark for Rust was only registered in the United States. But as we all know, the Rust community is global. And in fact, when we looked, there are active Rust communities in 21 other countries. So one of the things we did this year is to file trademark registrations in all 21 countries. There's cost associated with that. There's also overhead, right, in terms of just process and documents and responding to questions. But that is something that we've invested heavily in this year. And I think last week we were certified in Peru. So there are like a lot of these sort of housekeeping things that happen, and we have individual contributors who reach out to us and say, hey, there's this piece of infrastructure that I have been using my personal credit card to pay for the Rust project for 5 years. And is this something that the Rust Foundation can take on? So a lot of things that we do are, relatively small in terms of overall costs, but they're big to those individual contributors, right? It is a relief to that person who is no longer running a personal server or whatever the case may be, paying for a newsletter. There are a lot of different things like that where the Rust Foundation has jumped in and taken over the cost and the infrastructure management in some cases as well.
So is the reason that this is something that the foundation specifically is getting involved in is because there are costs associated with it? Because I do remember, for example, docs.rs was an example of this happening before the foundation.
I think that people are reaching out to the Rust Foundation because there are costs associated with it. We have resources other than just straight money, right? We have expertise, lawyers, and certainly access to security specialists and things like that. That should a project member have a question or a need that just requires resources that they don't have, the Rust Foundation is a good place to start. Yeah.
So, Mark, maybe you can speak to this one. When the foundation does agree to transfer resources of something that was on a personal server to something that the foundation is providing, does the foundation take stewardship of whatever that was, or does that still remain within the project and it's sort of a no strings attached agreement between the foundation and the project, or is it somewhere in the middle?
Sure. Yeah, I think, as with all of these things, I would say it sort of depends to some extent, but ultimately, I think it is somewhere in the middle, right? The foundation, to some extent, it's no strings attached, right? From the technical direction, the foundation really doesn't care. But I would say that, as part of the foundation's sort of general goal to, be legally compliant and so forth, there are, elements of where we can help both through advice, but also things like, you're a Rust maintainer, maybe you don't want to go spend your weekends reading up on what the privacy policy for this service needs to look like, what the requirements for responding to those requests under GDPR and so forth might be. And so the foundation takes some of that on, but as part of that, might say, hey, if we're going to do this, we need the ability to, delete accounts. And I think, the Rust project has some experience doing that in the past. And, as we continue in the future, we'll continue developing the sort of resources and tools to connect people with the right expertise to enable them to be productive.
So is the foundation also providing legal resources to the project? Because I know crates.io, for example, has to comply with DMCA and GDPR.
Yeah, so I think the best way to put this in some sense is that, from a sort of purely legal perspective, the foundation is paying for these services, and in some sense they are the foundation's. But, from a technical direction perspective and from even, sort of a policy perspective, while the foundation definitely has, opinions and intends to advise and make sure that things are, moving in the right direction, we also really care that the maintainers, both in the projects and the broader community, feel like they are being supported and not some elephant walking into the room and just saying, "Here's how things are."
So here's one question I'm not sure that y'all can answer, but that came in. Is one of the missions of the foundation to get Rust to be legally usable in critical environments such as space and/or health? I'm not sure if is that a technical question or is that like a legal question?
It sounds like a product question, and there's a fine line between, is it product direction or technical direction, because we have a really technical product. I would assert that is outside the purview of the Rust Foundation, right? The project decides the product direction and the technical implementation of that direction, and the foundation supports it. If there were an opportunity for the foundation to provide some type of resource to empower a group of people in the project to make progress on that as an objective of their own, then that's a place where I think the foundation could help. But I don't expect that the foundation will set product direction. Mark, do you want to say something else or different?
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Shane. And I would add also that, for all of these sort of somewhat murky questions, I think the foundation's sort of general perspective is, if the project wants something, let's figure out whether we can do it. And in general, like the answer is, yes, and rather than, well, maybe not, for many of these questions. And I think, as the project evolves, we're definitely seeing, interest in sort of across the board of, I want my pet feature. And for some of those features, it's the foundation sort of can't really do much to help because it's, just language design and implementation work or crates.io work or whatever. But for the cases where the foundation can help, whether that's through legal resources or through, maybe some sort of targeted funding for like servers or, whatever, I think the foundation is willing to, provide that and, explore how best to do that.
I didn't see this earlier, but somebody did mention that the foundation's covering the hosting costs for This Week in Rust now.
That's right. Yes. That's an example where there was a community member who reached out to the foundation and said, "Hey, this feels like something you should be paying for." And we said, "Yes, it does." So yeah, absolutely. As folks identify other things that they're out of pocketing that are project assets, you should take advantage of us.
Well, we wait to see if we get any more questions. I would actually like to go back to the trademark for a minute, because hearing that the foundation expanded the trademark to 21 new countries is interesting to me. Can you talk a little bit about like what the benefit of that was and why specifically having it in countries that already had an active Rust community, it was the metric there?
Yeah, trademark protects use. And making sure that the project is protected where the project lives seems like the right approach, right? If in a world where we have unlimited funds, I would say like let's blanket the world with protections for the project. But given that we do have finite funds, it seemed reasonable, and in fact was the recommendation of our trademark attorney, right? This is one of those places where the foundation leverages the expertise of people who work in this field to advise us. We are a fantastic group of volunteers who are passionate, but in the same way that the project has gaps in terms of expertise and skills, too gaps in the things that we have expertise on, and trademark law is definitely not well represented on the project board of directors. And so one of the first things we did is to engage with a trademark attorney and say, how do you recommend that we proceed here? That is the approach that she said would make the most sense. So yeah, we looked, literally in fact, the attorney did a search of Rust meetups and different kinds of organizations worldwide to see where we have sort of concentrations of activity, and then created a list and a recommendation for us. Yeah.
Were there any countries where that process ended up being like more interesting or more complicated than others?
I mean, we get into some interesting, so I guess the TLDR is not really, we get into some interesting conflicts because Rust is kind of a generic word, right? And as we all know, there's like a movie and other references, video game, so the same thing happens around trademark, wherein a country responds with hey, this is rejected because there is another company that is I don't know, providing actual Rust services, or I think there was an example that was like an architectural firm in a country that was using the name Rust. And then there's just a process of going through and making the case that these are not conflicting usages of the word Rust, and that the two things can cohabitate. Yeah, it's bureaucracy and paperwork mostly. So that's not that interesting. I'm trying to think if there's something else that we can share with you. One of the things that we haven't talked about is the growth in the membership. Right, the Rust Foundation was created earlier this year, at the beginning of this year, as a partnership between AWS, Google, Mozilla, Microsoft, and Huawei. And not long after we founded, the Meta, or formerly known as Facebook, joined as another platinum sponsor. And recently we announced our 15th silver member. So that brings our total membership up to 21 different companies. And the silver membership, we're starting to see companies like Toyota Connected, ARM, and Noldus. And so, we're really excited about the momentum and the resources that are going to make it possible for us to continue to realize our ambitions. And as the community comes up with new requests for funding from us, we'll be able to meet those. So that's been really exciting as well.
Awesome to hear about that growth.
Yeah.
I think we've covered all the questions. So was there anything else that either of you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I guess to add to Shane's point on the membership, I think one other sort of aspect that I'm at least looking forward to as sort of a project member is seeing, okay, we have all these members, how do we engage with them to get, we have obviously input to the project through surveys and other sort of means, but how do we, enable the sort of maybe more technical, or maybe it's more, direct relationship building. And I think there's a lot, I've learned personally speaking to people sort of outside the project and saying, what are you using Rust for? And then taking that back, whether it's into, concrete decision-making, or just, it's fun to see all the places Rust is getting used.
Yeah, I have really enjoyed our membership spotlight series. As I think of the questions that writers and reporters ask, and that my leadership asks at Amazon, like where should this be used? Where is it getting used? Where are we seeing success stories? The membership spotlight is a great place to read about that, right? Because we are asking those same questions of our members who are obviously invested enough to invest in the Rust Foundation and are interested in supporting the project and its maintainers. So it's there are there are so many more opportunities for us to provide platforms like this one, but also to get into more sort of user group discussions, so high fidelity conversations about what's happening with Rust. As we look at the trends with the Rust developer community, the latest statistics from Slashdata show us that 1.1 million Rust developers worldwide, which makes us the fastest growing language over the last 2 years. So there are, where, in 2019, it might have been reasonable to assume that what's going on with Rust users. I think there's been an explosion, and we need to start to think about other opportunities to give visibility into what the users are doing. And again, that's not something that the Rust Foundation is going to drive, but we do have responsibility to the project to provide a platform so that the project can get that feedback from those users.
Awesome. We did get 2 more questions in while we were doing that, and I want to get to them before we wrap up. First one I can actually answer. Somebody was asking if a recording is going to be available because they arrived late. Yes, there will be. This is being recorded, and it will be available, I assume, within the next day or 2. I don't know that we gave an exact timeline.
That sounds reasonable. I don't have an exact timeline from our tech.
But yes, there will be a recording available.
Yes.
And then, Mark, maybe you can speak to this last question. Providing contributors and maintainers with more tools to do their free work is in a more efficient way is nice, but won't it just end up being more work for them and lead to more people burning out? How is the foundation going to make sure that volunteers are supported other than just giving them more tools and more work?
Yeah, so I can definitely speak to that. I guess I think this is, to some extent in reference to our cloud build project, and I think it's a consideration that we've definitely thought about. How do we make sure that the resources we're giving aren't, just seen as a way of extracting more value or whatever. And I think the sort of position I've had is that, as someone who contributes to the Rust compiler, I at least can say that I sort of, to some extent, gain more if I can say, okay, I'll just allocate a time of my, an hour a day, and that's it. And if I can do more work in that hour, I come away happier than, sitting around waiting for minutes at a time, waiting for things to compile, especially because, at least in my experience, I think everyone has, their own sort of work style and personality, but the more we can enable people to do that work, there's also the sort of benefit of, if it's not just you doing it, it's 10 of you or, 10 people, that also enables people to, pull back and say, okay, I'm going to maybe not try to wear, 20 hats across the project and let someone else step up who is enabled by the foundation's, contributions to these resources.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Shane?
Yeah, as I talk to my own engineers about compile time, it's not just the time spent waiting; it's the loss of context, and they express a lot of frustration. And the long wait times, they've gone off and they've read something else, and they've completely lost their place, and so it creates a lot of additional cognitive load for the engineers. It just makes it harder to do the job effectively, so the intent is never to extract more work out of anyone. The intent is to make it more joyful to do the work you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could also argue that if folks are spending less time compiling, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to use their additional time to do more work. They are volunteers, and I think you could argue, right, that this is just going to enable them to do less work, or at least spend less time doing the same amount of work.
Absolutely, absolutely. However you want to spend your time saved not watching compiles. We support that, absolutely, and all the things that we do. It is about responding to requests to improve the experience of being a maintainer. Again, trying to optimize the health and wealth of our Rust project. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I might add to just a tail end of that is that, as we look to both the cloud build resources and sort of future resources, one of the things that I'm hopeful about is that, I think today I definitely have, felt the sort of pain of someone comes to the project and says, I'm having trouble building the project or whatever, and there's like nothing I can do, right? They're on a platform that I don't have access to, or they're on a platform that maybe I could get access to, but it requires, jumping through hoops. And I think the foundation is uniquely positioned to sort of pre-jump through those hoops for maintainers and say, hey, when you have this kind of request from the community, here's your SSH access or, whatever the detail is, and you just have that access to that platform, that machine, whatever the tool is that you need to do that work most effectively. And, I think with all the tools that the foundation supplies, they're opt-in, right? We're not going to tell you, you have to use these resources. And I absolutely believe that, the foundation wants to always enable people to do work, whether they're directly using the foundation's resources or the much larger set of people who, don't have direct access to the foundation resources, but still should be able to contribute, still be able to engage with the project. And we definitely want to allow that to happen.
That makes a lot of sense. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that Jane, who's a friend of mine and another member of the foundation board, asked if we finally have a CEO of Rust. Yes, it's still me. I proclaimed it on stage at RustConf. If you want to take that title from me, you must defeat me in a pun-off live at RustConf. This is how it works. This is how it's always worked. I don't know why there's any confusion about this. So just to make sure that we're all clear on that, the CEO of the Rust Foundation is not the CEO of Rust.
That is exactly right, but I do want to see a pun off. Can we please do that anyway?
I mean, if anyone wants to challenge me, I am so down.
I feel certain that I'm not qualified, but I'm definitely going to ping back later and ask her how her pun game is.
All right. Well, I think that is all we have time for. Do y'all want to make any last quick remarks before we wrap this up?
Well, I would just say that I am so grateful to be a part of something that is so significant to our industry. There are very few opportunities that you get in a career. I've been doing this for almost 30 years now, and I have not had a lot of opportunities like this one. And the other part of this experience that has been just remarkable is that as an engineering manager, you are constantly looking for engineers who are just passionate about the work that they do. And there is ridiculous passion in this project. And that is also well represented on your Rust Foundation Board of Directors. And it has just been a fantastic experience getting to know everybody and understanding what your needs are and looking for ways to solve those. I want to thank everyone for attending today, and I really hope that we've given you something valuable here. Keep pinging us, keep asking us for things, keep telling us what you're frustrated about, and we will keep trying to do better for sure. This is an iterative process, and we have not nailed it yet, but we are trying.
And the plan is to do these quarterly, right?
That is exactly right. Yes.
All right. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, I also want to thank everyone for all the questions today, and going forward, I think both in future AMAs and in other venues, we'll definitely continue engaging and hearing from everyone. And I'm looking forward to answering, or to Beck answering.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to do this today. Thank you to everybody who joined us and for all of your wonderful questions. If your question wasn't answered, I believe the plan is to get those answered in a blog post at some point, although I do think we got to everything. There will be a recording available. Keep an eye on foundation.rustlang.org for that in the near future. And with that, we'll see y'all later.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.